it's in session. Well, at 7:30. With the call, there's a meeting of the Board of Education to order. Rise, please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, I have to press the button, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome everybody. This is the first real meeting of the new board. So I'm excited to welcome all our new members, all of whom are happy to see you still with us. This meeting is a board retreat format. So to anyone watching at home, it's a little bit different. Every month we have a business meeting where we have public comment and a chance to hear from different constituencies. That is not with the purpose of board retreats. The board retreat, whenever we have a board retreat meeting, it's really a chance for us as a board to have more of an extended opportunity in a smaller circle here to talk with each other and to discuss the issues before us. As you know, because of sunshine laws, the 8 of us cannot talk in private. A lot of people don't understand that it's not like we can go out, the 8 of us, for coffee and talk about the budget. We don't do that. If there's a quorum, we can't talk about anything. So this is really our only chance as a board to really talk about some of the meaty issues. And so obviously today, the biggest issue on our agenda is the board budget. And we'll be talking about that. We're talking about the pool. But we have a couple other things on the agenda that we're going to get to. First off, and I want to welcome Chief Healy. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, Chief, because we appreciate you coming because we know we wanted to talk about the speed cameras and everything. But even before that, on behalf of the district and certainly everybody in Riverside over in my community, we really wanted to thank the Greenwich Police Department for all the work they did and the outstanding work in apprehending that individual, that very scary incident back in September. All of us really appreciate the work there.
Oh, good. I don't have to press the button. Well, thanks for having me. I will say that early on we had a lot more information that we were not able to share with too many people because it would have been a jeopardy, put the investigation in jeopardy. But the detectives, once the case was handed over to them, really kind of did a lot of work, which involved a lot of search warrants and interviews and follow up. And the community also was significant in helping us with their cameras and other information. So it was, it was people were asking every day about, and we just couldn't say, even though we were monitoring to make sure, a little extra to make sure everybody stayed safe. So hopefully this will be a good result.
So with that said, I know we've probably some board members that have questions about speed cameras and school zones, but maybe before questions, maybe you could just give us an overview, because I know there's been a lot in the press, and
Sure.
I don't know if you could give us a little bit of background about where we are and process
Right.
and what the department's doing.
Right. So this began in 2024 when we had a change in the state statute that would allow us to deploy speed cameras and red light cameras in town, as a municipality, if we desired. And what we did was we did an extensive survey of both public and private schools and identified the locations where people were violating the speed limit during the prior to the bell times, in the beginning and in the afternoon of school time. So we looked at several vendors. We went with a Blue Line, which is a company out Midwest. So mostly retired officers who have a lot of experience with traffic enforcement. Part of the model is that this particular system, it didn't cost us anything to install the system, and there is a administration of the violation. So we kind of made the public aware of it once we passed the town. So state statute was passed and a town ordinance. And then we kind of went into a plan to notify people of that. And they worked over the summer. It was really kind of difficult. We didn't get all of the permits. Everything had to go through the state. Some of the schools zones have different speed limits. Like Eagle Hill's 20, and Hills, Post Road is 25. Those types of things. So we had to get through all that process, and we're trying to be very transparent about it. So it started up in November with the first 4 cameras, and then just recently with the additional 5 cameras. And there's a couple of layers. First of all, the company uses an algorithm to determine if there were oddities about the plate. So if it doesn't match up with a registration, they delete those, and then they send those to the police department in a batch, and a police officer reviews it, goes through to make sure that everything looks like the speed limit was being violated, the plate matches the car, and those types of things. And then the company then sends out initially a warning, and that was for a 30-day period, and then a summons. The first summons is $50 with a service fee. The second one is $75 with a service fee. A lot of people are asking about where the money's going. It's going to go into a special account for the town for the kind of my 3 E's: education, engineering, and enforcement, to support this system of keeping the school zone safer. There is a third layer of review where someone can appeal the ticket, and the police advisory board that we have of civilians appointed by the first selectman, actually the board of selectmen, will review tickets that are challenged. If there's some issue with the issuance of that ticket, and of course it can be challenged. The fourth way is up to the courts in Stamford. So we're still working with the relationship there because we're one of the first towns in Fairfield County to do the system. I mentioned before about red light cameras. So we looked hard at whether or not these systems would have a positive, the result. We were going to cause more problems with a particular solution, and the speed cameras we think are a positive. Red light cameras, you have to have a certain criteria to meet them, and I think it's important just to explain that because the state does monitor what we're doing, and we only have 2 intersections in town, up at exit 5 and at exit 3, where a red light camera would be appropriate. And our option is not to put the cameras there right now because we feel that it would cause more accidents than it would help. So, we're always looking at the pluses and the minuses to the system. So, and just to give you some numbers, I got these just yesterday from the vendor. I'll give you one example because in the issuance of warning tickets, when those were issued, Eagle Hill School on Glenville Road, there was about 1,230 violators. And once the ticket, after the 30-day warning, it's down to 116 summonses being issued. So I think the word's gotten out. Another place where we had a lot of violators was North Street School, where we had 4,341 violations during the school day and 107 violators now that they're issuing tickets. So
it was 4,000 during like the first month or the first 2 months?
Correct. Yeah. So, and again, these numbers are preliminary, but we wanted to give you kind of the flavor. So in both cases, you look at almost a 90% reduction in speeders, and the company initially, from their research, said it would be about 70%. But again, there's still an educational process, and we look at engineering, making sure that the signs are right, that the flashers are going right, and still trying to get the word out. I don't want to give any tickets out. I would rather have people comply with the speed limit and be safe. I will say I looked to my traffic expert, Sergeant Smith, another Greenwich High School graduate, and a longtime police officer. His observation because he runs the traffic section, was that one of our distressing observations was that there were these big yellow buses that were violating the speed limits. And we're going to probably make sure that you guys are aware of that as well. I mean, even at schools where they were delivering kids to that particular school. So, we're hoping that we'll, now that that's something we're made public, will even work out better. But, no one's perfect, and these things happen. But I think overall, it's still early in the system, so I think it's probably appropriate for me to give you guys a heads up on how it's progressing. So, if we were to collect the fines for all the tickets that were issued so far, and it's only been about 6 weeks, it'd be about $30,000. So, But again, I'm not looking for, I know I distress when in social media say about it being a money grab, but it's the money's going back into these programs to keep the school zone safe. Um, so the subject to your questions, I think that's kind of a quick overview.
So just to clarify, so is that right? So right now there are nine different zones that we have
Let's see.
cameras. Is that right?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 actually right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a mixture of um, Board of Ed schools and private schools.
Correct. And we applied for permits to utilize these at all schools, public and private, and we can add cameras at later dates but these were the places where there was the most speeding going on. I also like I said, we also have the opportunity like when Central Middle School and I've been involved in some of the planning for that. We'll be adjusting the location of the cameras when the traffic pattern changes in that location also.
And then there was a press release this week about adding it to the high school. Is that
Right. But again, some of the roads are somewhat, the logistics are difficult. So I know some people talked about speed bumps and other things that are, possibilities, but speed bumps do cause a problem for causing damage to, especially emergency vehicles if they have to respond to emergencies.
questions? Karen?
Great. Chief, thanks for
Yep.
being here. A few folks have reached out with questions about privacy. Could you clarify, do these cameras capture all license plates or just the license plates of people speeding? And is there any chance they capture images of children?
The no images of the occupants. When I didn't get to see the warning tickets when they first came up, but they're basically going on the license plate. And the retention is limited for the violators. Initially, they retain all the information, but then once we get the tickets or the warnings done, that's the information that's retained until it's fully adjudicated. But besides being the police chief here, I'm also the vice president of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, and next year will be the president. We are trying to address concerns that some organizations have about privacy. And generally speaking, we have a number of license plate readers in town. And it's almost as if I asked you to ask that question. The license plate readers were a critical component of making that arrest. It was the technology that helped us. So I think that at some point there'll probably be some limitation to how long we keep just general information unless it's a violator. And we don't want to keep stuff a long time because it's cripplingly expensive, the data storage. So we generally, our license plate readers after 90 days are clear. So, and the officer reviews the material, and then the next person will be somebody appointed by the selectmen, and they'll have a non-disclosure statement agreement that they'll have to sign. So.
Karen, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. The other question, much like Karen, wasn't just about privacy, but it's also the hours that these are on. Are they on 24/7? Is it just when there's lights? Is it just during school hours, during the week, et cetera?
Sure. Currently, it's 1/2 hour before first bell and a half hour after last bell. When the lights are flashing, we enforce the speed that the flashing light indicates to 20 or 25. And during the school day, which again, there's still a concern for safety of the children, it would enforce the normal speed limit, which is either 25 or 30. But it's not. I don't want you driving up Riversville Road fast, at 6 o'clock because you think you're safe. So still do the right speed limit.
Thank you.
I think the town of Greenwich's website is a little bit behind, but I think we can ask them the town hall. They still have more locations to follow, only listing 5, and they're indicating that this is only during school hours and only when the lights are flashing.
Right. I'll get on that right tomorrow.
Yeah,
So.
And I know that's not the Greenwich Police Department website, so not pointing fingers over there.
Sure. No.
So personally, just speaking for myself, I mean, thank you. I think this is terrific. I mean, if you've realized a 90% reduction in some of these places where you've installed these cameras, I mean, that says it right there. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I think with all deliberate speed, I'd love to see them across town. I don't know what other people think, but I think it's this is vitally important and the safety of our kids, and it's really great stuff.
Right. And like I said, we're going to keep we'll keep giving you guys the update on how it goes. And then, I said, there's definitely going to be some growing pains. We'll have to adjust things a little bit. So,
Um, do you know if there a rollout at the high school? Just, I mean, we have a lot of student drivers who certainly I think they would benefit from slowing down, but is Ralph Mayo going to sort of do a PSA of, hey, by the way, there's,
Oh, yeah,
for the kids to know?
right. Our two school resource officers, they have Ask Wally, a TV show, the internal one that they get a lot more clicks than the Chiefs show on. But they've been putting the word out, and we've actually had a lot of recent interaction because we've talked a lot about the e-bikes, which is a challenge. So we just put out a new flyer on that, and we've tried to inform parents to be more cautious about allowing, and wearing helmets. And Ralph has been out there with the two SROs, giving some educational guidance about their operation of those. So that's, and like I said, he runs a tight ship over there. So it's
Great, thank you.
I'm just curious, is this coming from you, or is this coming from the governor or Hartford? Or, I mean, I know that they're starting to implement these cameras and like all over the country. So I just wanted to know.
So we've had license plate readers for a number of years. Initially, they were on the police cars, and as the technology got better, we also have fixed cameras, and those have been, like I said, critical in some major crime, solving a number of crimes. I think it's just as the law changed to allow these speed cameras to be used near schools, and that, and we're I think we're one of the first 6 or 10 towns that got it approved. So there wasn't any particular push, and this particular model saved. We didn't have to put any outlay. I think if I had to go to the BET for money for something and they had no guarantee for a return, I might not have been able to have been as successful. But I think this particular model is working pretty well for us so far. So, but I think the license plate reader is the place, is the way to go. We have coordination with other states and other towns and it really has, helped us solve some auto thefts, solve some burglaries, and missing persons. A person who was had Alzheimer's that we were able to see the car and it alerted at headquarters and the officer stopped it within a few blocks, and it really made a big difference that way. So, but I think the technology is still developing, and we have to always be cautious that no one will abuse that. So.
Chief, thank you for your time.
While I'm here, before I don't mind, I'll leave right away after that. I just want to see if you had any questions about the school resource officers or about the cameras. I know that we have over 600 cameras at Board of Ed, that come back to police headquarters, and that Brent is monitoring here as well. But again, that's another thing that we do that, we don't talk about all our successes because some of the things we talk about for security, we can't in the public. We have to have that. But even at Eastern Middle School, there's been some improvements to that particular school area. So I just thought, in case you guys have any questions about that.
Just similar to my previous question on privacy, do you have a similar retention policy that after 90 days?
90 days, unless there is a criminal matter or investigation open. So, one of the challenges we had was that for DWIs, people were waiting. If it's a criminal matter, we keep them for 2 years on a motor vehicle. So the lawyers were waiting until after 24 months, and then they were asking for the case to be reopened. So now we keep DWIs indefinitely so that the attorneys will have less to do with that. But, if it's a criminal matter, we'll keep it a long time. But anything non-criminal, it's 90 days and we change it. Oh, this was easy. This isn't so. So I have to not wear my uniform more often. So, but thank you. Appreciate
Thanks for
it.
coming.
Yep.
So next on the board agenda is the BOE committee assignments. So we put this on the agenda. So every November, we create new assignments for the committee. There are two standing committees of the board, and then over time there have been different ad hoc committees. And then there are official representatives that the board has to other entities in town. I put this on the agenda not to talk about people's individual assignments. If you want to talk to me about the assignments, feel free to talk to me offline. They some people have, but for the most part, I think the assignments sound like people are pretty happy or copacetic with the assignments. But I put it on the agenda because we did do something a little differently here in that we've tried to, and talking to Sophie, we've tried to give the different committees a little bit of a charge or a little bit of sense of direction. And the reason why we did that, some of you know, years ago in my hometown in New Jersey, I was on the Board of Ed there for 6 years. And so I have a little bit of different experience. And I know that in that board, a lot of what the real work got done at the committee level for all the reasons of sunshine laws and everything else. There's only so much that really we get done when 8 of us are sitting around in public with microphones around a skirted table with 100 people yelling at us. I don't know. My own personal concern is that as a board, we maybe have not been taking advantage of the committee structure as well as we could have. As far, in the past, committees have met intermittently. The budget committee meets around budget time, and then we'll go months at a time. And that's nobody's fault. That's just kind of been standard operating procedure. And so this is a thought that we're going to put out there. And that's why I put it on the agenda around trying to give the committees a little bit more of a charge or a purpose to carry forth some of the board work at that level in a more meaningful way, so that then they can come back to the full board table and we can move forward with some issues that we know we're facing. Case in point, as an example, one of the things that we put on the we're suggesting on that the budget committee look at is transportation, and because we know that transportation has been a source of frustration for a number of reasons. But on the funding side, we know that the transportation costs here and many other districts have been through the roof, and maybe it's something we need to, at the committee level, can look at as far as everything from how those contracts are formed, how we're funding transportation, and some of those other studies that I know Ben and Mike and everybody are looking at. But using the budget committee as a lens might be able to forward that work a little bit more meaningfully. So that's kind of an example there. But I'll stop babbling because I was hoping to instead get other people's feedback and a sense of what people think of that. Of all that, this idea of a committee charge in general.
I think the idea is great. Thank you for putting it together. My only question, I guess clarification, is for meeting cadence, will that be the responsibility of the chair of the committee to organize and keep record of the meetings?
Yes. So, and the meeting cadence is, as chair, I do not have the authority to determine your meeting cadence. So that's suggested based on past precedent. I made myself chair of kept myself chair of the policy committee, for example. We meet bi-weekly. The reason why, which we found successful last time, the reason why we do that is we have shorter meetings. Policies, you can talk a lot for a very long time about policy and not get a lot done. So we try to keep those meetings to an hour and instead meeting bi-weekly, and that has a chance to go back and have second reads and get things done and multiple drafts instead of all sitting around and wordsmithing something for 3 hours. So that's kind of why, that's the idea behind that. But yeah, as the individual chairs of the committees, by our bylaws, I would defer to the individual chairs for the real determination of the cadence. Mm-hmm. Karen Hirsch, go ahead.
No,
I appreciate though that we have speaking of bylaws, that we have maintained our tradition of having, we affirmed our tradition of having 2 Karens on the board again. So Karen H, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, especially with the standing committees, typically they do have their tasks set ahead for them because they're in policy, in the majority of them. And so, that's out, laid out. But I love the idea that, we're, trying to set a more regular schedule, which we used to have. But so that's what I was going to say for the new members. A lot of the standing committees do have a very specific charge in hand, but not a set schedule, if that helps. But I know we have some new committees this year as well.
In an effort to stay on schedule here, and waste a few minutes to get to 8 o'clock for your next agenda item, I think it's great. Definitely taking smaller bites, and then bringing bigger meals to the table. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, before we move on, could you talk?
So protocol, I do have to recognize folks. But go ahead, Karen.
Sure. Could you just briefly talk about the role of these representatives that you've listed out?
So historically, there are different entities in town where we historically send a representative, everything from PTAC to the BET to the RTM. What I tried to do was, some of these are bigger roles than others. As depending on how often these folks meet. So, for example, Bob is the RTM chair, RTM representative, because Bob has RTM experience, and the RTM is a very big organization, obviously. So that is a much more heavy assignment. So the reason why Bob only has one, but also, so I rated that high, whereas everything else is medium, and then some of them are kind of low touch. Like the distinguished teacher, for example, is not all year round. It's just during their season when they're adjudicating and defending those awards and awards. Building committees, we anticipate an unprecedented 5 building committees. Those are all high responsibilities. Most building committees will often meet bi-weekly, if not weekly, depending on where they are in the process. So I tried to balance out. If you have a building committee assignment, you have less of some other representatives.
I just wanted to say, I think it's a great idea working together. I think I'm excited to work with my curriculum committee and collaborate with them on screen time.
So that said, we will now move on to the next agenda item, keeping with the idea of retreat. So the next agenda item is BOE norms. Sophie, Tony, and I had some conversations about BOE norms that Sophie wanted to bring to the table. I think it's great though, but so Sophie's going to take the lead on this.
So actually, we had a good conversation just talking about, now that we have 4 new board members, like what the expectations are for essentially is kind of basic, like being prepared for meetings, attending meetings, whatnot. And then I was doing a little research, and of course I discovered there are 2 bylaws that are relevant. So I'm not going to read them, especially one of them is extremely long. But we do have an expectation for board members. It's 9273, and it goes on for several pages. So everybody could read it themselves. And then we have a code of ethics, which is 9271. But I think what I really liked about them is, I'm going to just highlight a couple of things with the code of ethics, that it says the board members and superintendent will always carry out their respective roles with the highest level of professionalism, honesty, and integrity. And we recognize that we represent the entire community, and they must ensure that the community remains fully informed on all school-related matters. And then there's about 15 other bullets that I'm not going to read. And with the first one, with 9273, it talks about attending all board meetings insofar as possible, listening respectively to everyone who communicates with the board, people who come to present, as well as fellow board members, and modeling civility. I just think it's, and talks about meeting protocol, which is coming prepared, identifying issues of concern before the meeting whenever possible. Something was interesting that frankly we haven't done the past 2 years. It says circulate proposed motions and amendments whenever possible, at least 48 hours prior to the meeting. Yeah, which I liked that one. I was like, we certainly haven't done that. So, and minimizing unnecessary repetition, which I know that one of Mike's big goals is running efficient meetings. And having them be a little shorter. So I like to see that that was in there. But it's nice to see that, of course, other boards have already considered all of this. And so I think my recommendation in the interest of being efficient is that everybody should pull up these two policies and read through them. But I would welcome conversation on this. One thing I will notice, and since we were talking about screens and Wendy just mentioned them, I find the screen super distracting, and that's why I don't bring my iPad to meetings, which I know a lot of people like to have their computers. And Paul, you were referencing like it's much easier for those of us who need reading glasses, and I'm one of those people. So I know people have their screens for all sorts of reasons, but I especially feel like when we have the public speaking, that we all should be looking up as much as possible, because I know sometimes we forget how passionate our speakers are and how much time and effort they've put into their comments. And there has been feedback from the public of feeling like the board is not listening sometimes. And this is not in reference to anyone in particular, and certainly the new board members, like you're brand new. But so I think this is that we can all do better. And just be mindful of like when the public is there. It's, I think, especially, and also when we have outsiders coming in to do presentations, like they really care that they know that we're listening. And I think it also makes for a much more efficient meeting if people are listening too. So that's all I have to say about it. But I hope everybody can look at those two bylaws because I think they're really helpful.
It was 9273 and 9271.
Yes.
Any other thoughts? All right. Thanks, Sophie, for that reminder. That's helpful. Okay, so we're going to move on to the heart of the meeting. So we have two bigger discussions this evening. The first one is the GHS pool feasibility study. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jones, who has some updates before we can talk about some things.
Sure. And we did get the questions answered today. There was confusion about which set we were answering before, but hopefully you've all had a chance to look at those. So we will get them also posted if they're not already. I'm going to actually ask Mr. Branyan to come forward because we've been doing a lot of work on this project and just kind of want to update where we are as of tonight.
So I think the elephant in the room is the tennis issue. And so we have had a very productive meeting with tennis stakeholders. Actually, this morning, I already had a meeting with the design team, which is AECOM and Antonazi. They're taking a fresh, hard look at the concerns raised about how do you keep the tennis courts on the campus with the driveway and the pool. So I met with them. They're going to be spending their Christmas gift to me, they said, is they're going to spend the Christmas season to work on this. And we'll regroup early January and then get together with both the feasibility committee and the tennis community just to vet the concerns. But the engineers are taking a look at turning radius. There's a significant grade issue they're dealing with. And of course, we all know the environmental issues there as well. So we're just trying to thread the needle on all of those issues. So I think we mentioned in the Q&A that was distributed as well as no action will be taken at the December 18th meeting. The document is not ripe for any action. I think that was well known, certainly communicated very passionately and correctly to us. So we're working on that. So I think the key thing is no action will be taken. I think that superintendent mentioned it will not even be on the agenda. So there shouldn't be any concerned that action or further discussion should occur on that because it's no longer ripe for discussion. I think that's the biggest development that we've had. So we'll know more early January, and then we can regroup with everyone.
Let me just put a finer point on that because we got a couple emails today kind of conflating the budget vote and the pool vote. So because we are going to take action next week, or we're scheduled to take action next week on the operating budget for next year. So it's important for anybody at home who's paying attention to the pool discussion that budget vote and the operating isn't the vote on the pool.
Correct. And I'll put a finer point on that is the capital budget was already approved and the capital budget's already in front of the office of the first selectman. The first selectman is the one who presents the capital budget. We have the only item in the capital budget for pool is a 4 million for A&E, but that's in front, but that has zero interaction with the operating budget that's before you.
Can you actually explain what A&E is, just for a lot of people don't understand?
Architectural engineering. So the traditional process, and it's done with Riverside as well. You put usually it's a couple $1 million ahead, so you can do the design, and then you build in year 2 or year 3, depending on the cash flow for the project. You put the larger construction number. So the normal process we use, and I think Riverside's a good example. The year we're sitting in, we were funded $2 million for our architectural engineering. The BET put the conditions of 1.4 million. So that is because the process is you need to get MI. So we worked on that process. That 600,000 is a number that we should be able to accomplish the goal of MI. So that's the process that we use for Riverside. That's the same process we would use for the pool. But there's no plan to spend that money until we have to get funded, but also what are we actually building?
So how did we come up with the 4 million number?
Working with the architects and the engineers on what was necessary if you're going to build the pool that was in the ed specs through design, that would be the number. That's not the number you need for MI.
It just seems like a really large number just for a pool. You know, it's not even the entire, extended project that we may be talking about.
No, and that's to get you the design documents, to go through the whole process to go to contract. So there's a lot of components in there. It is a big number, and it took a while for us to settle on what's the correct number needed in order to go to bid for construction. That's the number.
I thought that we were supposed to take a sketch to P&Z. Isn't that following the charter? Isn't there something about bringing a sketch to P&Z and then coming back and getting this $4 million number? I'm not sure we're doing this in the right.
I hear the question. I believe we are doing it in the right order. Is the 4 million is way too much for MI. So let's just use the Riverside example. We asked 2 million for Riverside, and we worked collaboratively with the BET, and they said, "What's the number you need for MI?" And we believe a solid number for municipal improvement is 600,000. So they conditioned the 2 million, and if you look in the budget book, it shows you that 1.4 of the 2 million is conditioned. So we can't touch that. But now that we have the 600,000 is unencumbered, now that the RTM has appointed the building committee, they're going to have their organizational meeting in January. They have funds available to start the MI process. But before they even do that, they have to go through the entire architect process to have an architect of record on for the project, and then they will start going through the ed specs and doing the preliminary design. But it's a very good distinction. They are not approving the plan for MI. They're just approving the concept that based on what's being in front of them, like of the massing of the building, this makes sense from a municipal improvement perspective.
Bob?
I had a question about the egress. Does the town pay for the egress, or is it put in the specs for the pool? And if the town does pay for it, do they have the understanding that they should not do anything with that until we figure out what we're doing with the pool?
So the Board of Ed has always carried that project in its capital budget. We have it in the year we're sitting in. We received, I think, it was 75,000 for design or construction, design, engineering review of the egress or the driveway. So we have engaged AECom because of their intimate knowledge of the campus with the environment. So they're working on that. We carry, I think, in year 4, year 5 of the capital budget, 7 million for the egress. And the biggest part of that is not just the driveway. It's a bridge. And the bridge is the biggest component of that because of the water works way that has to cross over. But we've always carried that, and I think is appropriately placed in the Board of Ed's budget because it's on our campus. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Veronica?
Thank you. At what part of this process is a building committee formed, and who will be on the building committee? And more specifically, I'm asking, will there be representation from all areas of the community, all stakeholders? That's the word I wanted to use.
So for the pool, once the educational specs are approved by the Board of Education, the superintendent then would submit a formal letter to the first selectman asking for them to start the process of forming a building committee. The Board of Selectmen nominates the members after they go through their process of going through all the people interested. They do interviews, they go through that process, then they nominate to the RTM.
So there's no specific, at any point, is there like a specific list of stakeholders? Like you'd have a representative from the pool. I would think a representative maybe from security would be important because of the egress, somebody from the tennis team. I'm sure I'm missing lots, but
those are all names that would just pass common sense. They should be considered for the nomination. Those are not enumerated in the charter. The charter just says you need to have 5 to, I think, 7 electorate of the town, and then they say there's 1 representative from the Board of Ed, 1 representative from the BET. So it's up to the selectmen to deal with, is it 5 or 7, and what's the best makeup? I think you saw that with the Riverside. They were just struggling with, and I think they even mentioned it at the RTM, just how do they get certain people with certain skill sets for the building committee.
Karen?
Thanks. I know it's early days. Do you have a sense for the extent to which this pool is anticipated to be available for the public to enjoy outside of school hours and other swim team use?
That was always the a component of the feasibility, that it's not just a high school athletic program. It is a community asset, and certainly just like any of our other facilities. Look, if you look at the campus, or any of our athletic fields, the GHS takes priority, and then the balance is then coordinated with Parks and Rec for the community. So there are athletic directors constantly talking with the Parks and Rec director on, we no longer need that field. And then they quickly reach out to the community who may have practice somewhere else. They said, field 6 opened up, and then everyone runs there. So we certainly try to maximize the community value.
Paul?
I just wanted to double back to Mr. Cheney. Maybe I missed the answer, and I apologize if you're reiterating. But the early part of the question was, we want to make sure the road doesn't go forward until the pool has been decided, until the tennis courts have been decided. And it sounds like, I think included in going forward is the $600,000 here for the MI, the $75,000 for the MI on the road. And should those be combined? At what early stage should they be combined? And I think I've certainly had some conversations that they should be combined. It's a puzzle. One's got to go somewhere, or the other won't fit.
I think the puzzle is a great analogy. I threw too many numbers out. Completely ignore the 600,000. It has absolutely nothing to do with the pool. So it has nothing to do with the pool. That is the Riverside. I was just using that as an example. This nothing to do with the pool. The 75,000 was the money that we have now for design for the driveway. AECom has been engaged with the pool work because of that coordination. And we certainly will not move one forward without the other. I think the puzzle is a good analogy. It's a puzzle, and we have to make sure the pieces fit together.
And if we were to add anything else to that puzzle, where along the lines and what authority does this board have to do that? And there's other things that are going on at the high school that, could affect this. And how do we add?
So I would say the document, the most important document is the educational specifications. So the board is then saying, this is what we want built. With these needs, and the ed specs, and we see in a final version will include both the driveway and the pool. Where does that fit? If we were not talking about, if we were last week, we would say it's 3 components, and I still would say it's 3 components today. It's the tennis, it's the driveway, it's the pool. How do those puzzle pieces fit together? Prior to this meeting, we were saying it was relocating the tennis courts off campus. Again, that message was received loud and clear. So it's those 3 puzzle pieces, the tennis, the driveway, and the pool. How do we figure those out? Those should be in one ed spec, the concept. So one building committee. It makes, from my perspective, 0 sense to have 3 building committees dealing with that because the coordination of that alone. And I think eventually you're going to run out of volunteers.
We're going to run out of board members.
So let me lead the witness a little further. On the road, I suspect there's going to be lights on the road for safety. Will there be lights included in these conversations?
So I would just politely say is we refer to it as a driveway. We always say driveway. So the driveway likely will have some type of safety lights. I would not equate those to any type of lights that people generally get concerned about for lighting athletic fields.
Karen H., go ahead.
Well, I think, Ben partially answered what I was going to ask, being that, the second egress and the tennis courts. I mean, the tennis courts have reached the end of their life as it is, and they were always needing to be moved in order to be able to put in the second egress. This is something we've known for years. And that was one project. And now with the pool, so it says, because I didn't think we would, you don't need a building committee unless you're getting funding back. Is that correct from the state?
No,
MI.
the chart, their language was recently changed a couple years ago. That it used to be that, but the language was changed that if any project requires an MI, it then requires a building committee.
Okay, well then it makes perfect sense, I think, then to put all 3 of them together, because I was going to say, we don't want one project held up based on the other one, whether it's slow moving. I know we've been waiting for state approval to cut that, curb and have access to the state road there. So, I mean, I suppose that's moved forward as well. So I just don't want to, if we put it all as one project and one thing still gets held up, we don't want it to hold up the other parts of this project. If we're putting them all together, the pool, the tennis courts, and the egress.
100% agreed. I would just, it's important to remember the curb cut's already there. The curb cut is there, the ADA parking lot is there. It's really, how do you connect that existing parking lot that was installed during the Cardinal Stadium renovation? How do you connect that parking lot to the parking lot behind the high school? And you have to go over a river or a water course. That requires the issue.
The ADA parking lot's the one right next to the stadium?
Yes.
We had to move trees and a whole bunch of stuff to put that in there too and stuff. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian?
Thank you. I'm sure this question the answer is online, so I apologize. And I could look it up. Central Middle School has currently 2 tennis courts, but I heard somewhere that maybe they're expanding to 4. They have 4 and they're keeping 4.
They have 4, and the current plan does not touch the tennis courts. So tennis courts as they exist will continue to exist as they exist.
Thank you.
Other questions? So one thing it sounds like I'm hearing as far as an emerging consensus is don't let me put words in your mouth, Ben, but combining the different aspects of this project under one building committee eventually, but tennis, road, pool, as opposed basically total, GHS campus type building committee as we move forward here. That's kind of what we're here. I'm hearing, but I know this is still early days, and we've got a lot of work to do to flesh that out. Is that fair?
I'll accept those words in my mouth. I would, if you don't mind, just I'll point out just I think it's somewhat relevant is we already have 3 of those capital projects. They are in our capital plan. They're just in outer years. So now at this point, it's just taking trying to move those outer years in. So those 3 projects are sitting in the capital plan that's been presented.
And I suspect some of the leading of the witness over here was wondering if there might be other aspects of the campus plan in outer years that we might want to consider too. But I think that's a conversation for a later date. That said, we know that there's a current price tag attached to the plan that we saw last week. And we know there's a lot of contingencies and other things built into that. I don't know if you could speak a little bit more, because I know there's been a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks around those numbers and putting a little bit of a finer tooth or a finer point on some of them. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. But.
But it's a big number. It's that's probably an understatement, but it's a big number. That's everyone leads with that when we talk about the pool. They mention the pool, and then they just look at me and say that's a big number. At this point, I'm just going to say it is what it is. We believe based on the work we've done, this is the number. Part of this whole process, we engaged a professional estimator based on the concepts that have been talked about, and that's the key is its concepts. They don't have design documents to go through. I think they did a very detailed job of it, but it is a big number. And I think also when we talk about the size of the number, and I think you mentioned it at the last board meeting too, is how do you start having the conversations about private donations to help offset that. The couple of the conversations I've had with some BET members is, and I'll just, since I have the mic, I'll say it, I think it's very important to, the words I've been using is we should not have projects that are pay to play. This is an educational asset. No one asked the community to fund Central Middle School. No one asked the community to have a private partnership for Old Greenwich School. But that being said, the pool certainly lends itself very easily to having private donations. And I think that is going to be a very strong component to help this project move forward. And especially now it's the 3 big puzzle pieces, if not more. So I'll call it 3 puzzle pieces. I think the board should, how do we want to move forward with endorsing that concept of private donations for the pool?
Yeah, Ben, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit on some of the things you said. One, the examples, the other 2 expensive examples you gave were to educate children. And I do believe that our primary mission is academics, is education. I think sports play a role, but I don't think they are at the same level as educating. And 2, I would challenge you to look at some of the educational specifications with the lens of wants versus needs. Looking through that, there are a lot of offices, a lot of rooms, a very large entryway. I would challenge the group to go back and see what is truly necessary versus what would they love to have.
Understood.
And let's talk about the aspects of the pool.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
Other thoughts on that? Questions? So all that said, we do have a draft resolution on the agenda tied to that, supporting the formation of an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization to support fundraising for this project. And I don't know, I know it's you, Dr. Jones, or Ben, who's who's best positioned to talk about that a little bit. This is not an action item. This is for us to read through.
I might just kick it off and just say that we want the board as quickly as we can to be able to support fundraising, and we need your support in order to do that. It is not something that Ben would manage or we would manage as the school district. This is about a 501(c), and we've already have interest in the community to do that. But the sooner we get it started, the sooner we can get on with, actually having a capital campaign and getting people excited about this project. So Ben, I'll let you get into the weeds of the document itself.
I wish the document could be shorter. I think if you know me, I really try to be, how condensed could I be? So I was actually embarrassed. I go, it's a 3-page document. I don't do 3-page documents, but I think given the perplexity of it, it's important just to itemize out where some of those issues. I think the absolute brass tacks of the issue is if you endorse this concept, you then allow this group to use the logos and to use all of the things that represent the district, because they are going to be representing the district to a certain way. So I think that's the biggest endorsement. But also going back to the prior comment, this really says we support this and we recognize the cost tag. But I think we try to put into some generic sort of general things that you would expect. This is the first draft. There's no pride of ownership or authorship on this. So if you want to have changes or edits or corrections, by all means, let us know. But as we were just thinking through what do we need, these are sort of those big topics that came up.
So I 100% agree with you that I think this document, shows that we're supportive of private donations for this pool, and I think it's a great idea. I also am going to point out it shows that the board is not taking responsibility for raising the private donations, which I think is also probably really important to the board to make that clear, right? That we appreciate that as a critical piece. I want to kind of go back to what you were saying about pay to play, and all of that. I think this is an amazing opportunity. I definitely want it to be very clear to everyone that we're not setting the precedent that going forward for buildings and things like that, we're always going to have a private fundraising component, that this is kind of a special project because it can have a lot more community use. And this would be the only public, indoor public, competitive pool in the town of Greenwich. So it's kind of a unique opportunity. Because every other pool in Greenwich that you can actually, indoor pool that's competitive, you have to belong and pay money to swim there. So this would be a real asset to the community, which I feel like is part of, to me, what the appeal would be in terms of fundraising. But anyway, I just want to point out the flip side of it. We're also saying we 100% are excited about this, and also it's not our responsibility to raise the money, and we're glad to lend our support in the sense of cheerleading you on, but the 501(c)(3) is going to be the ones raising the money and doing all of the accounting and whatnot.
Ms. Hirsch, please go ahead.
So since this is something that's generally new for us, this discussion of an external 501(c)(3), I had a couple of questions. One was, who's on the 501(c)(3), who would be selecting the members of the foundation committee? Who does this committee, foundation committee answer to? Is it only to the Board of Ed or other elected representatives? Do we have thoughts on that? And, how is that happening?
I would respond that the board does not have as it's set up. You're not picking who's on the board or on this 501(c)(3). We put in controls where you give reports out. I think the key too is on the gift acceptance is you always retain, the board retains, just as any gift. If there's sort of restrictions or strings attached, you can say no, because it's ultimately you are running the project, you're in control of the project with the ed specs. It's not the donor community. So you're not giving that control up. I think the important, it's a little bit of maybe the cart and the horse, which one's first is if you put this out there, we know there's already a community members out there working on this and we've heard they're working on the formalization of the 501c3. I think this just will dovetail nicely into their work. And once I think if this gets done, we'll quickly know who's out there and who's leading this project.
Okay, I mean, just because, the question then is if they're answering specifically to us or other elected bodies or representatives, I think that there's, a lot of detail that we still need to know. And I think additionally, my other question was on, where was it, on page 2, under now, after you wrote now, therefore, be it resolved by the Greenwich Board of Education that, number 3 said purpose and use of funds. It said the foundation's organizing documents and fundraising materials shall state that the funds are raised exclusively for charitable and educational purposes benefiting Greenwich Public Schools, including the pool project. So that, if this is not specifically only for the pool project, then I think that there's probably some other language that might need to go into here because everything else in this document specifically speaks to the pool. But number 3 suggests it could be for other purposes. So I think there's I love this idea actually, and I think it's a great idea because, quite honestly, the board is focused on many other things and, fundraising, what was not on our list of things to do. But I think this is fantastic. Having worked in other organizations like the PTA, which does a ton of fundraising for schools and so forth. So I just think if number 3 is saying it's benefiting the schools, including the project, it means that it's for other things as well. And the rest of the document speaks specifically to the pool. So I think we either need to revise section number 3 or revise the rest of the document.
The intent there, and if it wasn't clear, we certainly can adjust it, as going back to the puzzle pieces, is the intent there is to have a broader scope of maybe there's someone out there who wants to donate for the driveway or the tennis. So that's the intent there was to have a broader scope then. But
Right.
if there's conflicts in other sections, we can look at that.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying either number 3 would need to be revised or the rest of the document because it specifically stipulates pool project. And so I would, just revise just so what's included in said pool project, or if it's for other projects beyond the pool, project, which would be tennis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all.
It's a good point. If the previous part of this conversation talked about, an interest in expanding the scope, officially expanding the scope of whatever building committee eventually takes this on beyond just the pool, one wonders if this resolution should be so pool centric. And maybe that's marketing, but maybe that's something else to think about because we know firsthand there's a lot of very passionate people in the tennis community on this issue, for example.
So it could say, you could say pool / tennis, whatever it might be, or put a sentence in that defines what the pool project did. Pool project includes X, Y, and Z. That's all. I just think it's confusing one way or the other. That's all.
Yeah, Paul.
Before we would jump into that, I'd like to hear from professionals in the that did some fundraising for the Y. There's other projects that have already traveled down this particular path. I just want to be thoughtful of if we get too broad, people may not want to donate. I like the fact that we're talking about it. But let's make sure that we have all stakeholders, which are going to be are going to include the people that are looking to raise the money. And like I think someone just said it a moment ago, a little bit of marketing in here. And I do like the fact I actually looked at number 3, and when I got there, enjoyed the fact that it did stick that in there, right? It wasn't a main part of it, but it put it in there. Where Greenwich Public Schools, including pools, because it seems to me that after that, what it says is that it's up to this board whether to accept it and where to spend it. So we would have all of those rights if it was going all to the pool, if it went somewhere else. But thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, more a comment than a question. But Ben, I wanted to express my appreciation for the outreach you've done to the tennis community. It was a concern I'd raised at our meeting on November 20th. And for transparency, well, two things. One, for transparency, I did play varsity tennis. So I was a varsity swimmer before that. But look, speaking for myself, I could not personally support a pool proposal that results in the tennis team or another team being kicked off campus to make room for the pool.
To echo Karen, I too played varsity tennis at Greenwich High School. And I would not be in favor for moving them to another campus. Definitely not.
Okay, ready to move on? All right, so it sounds like on the pool issue, there's obviously a lot more work to come. The no decisions next week, and we'll take us back up in January. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if you're going anywhere though.
I don't know.
Right, and now for the main event, the major decision before us this month is the operating budget. Technically, by town charter, we have to make a decision on this before the end of the year, so we're scheduled to vote next week. We've had a couple of public comment sessions on this, but this is really the first time as a board that we've had opportunity, the 8 of us, to really talk about the operating budget. In the past, this board has spent a lot of most of this time talking about one item or 2 items. So we're going to try to structure this. Sophie and I were talking, we're going to try to structure this conversation a little bit different to make sure that we cover all the aspects of the operating budget. So there are 3 kind of buckets. Well, 4. First, we're going to turn it over to Ben and Dr. Jones for any updates or clarifications. And I know we had a finance meeting, budget meeting this week. So we want to, yesterday, so we want to update on that. But then there are 3 buckets of conversation. The first one being on start time and transportation, which we know was a major issue last year. We want to talk about that a little bit because that does not change in this budget. The second one is the changes at CMS, which could easily take over the whole conversation. And we're going to try not to do that because there are other aspects of the budget, although it's a very important issue before us. And certainly there were a lot of people in the community very concerned about it. And then the third, other questions and concerns about the operating budget as a whole. Because like we said, there's a big budget, there's a lot of things in it. So we want to make sure we provide time for all of that. All that said, Sophie, I know we had a finance meeting yesterday, so I don't know if you and Mr. Banny and Dr. Jones wanted to just update us on that conversation this week.
Sure. Yeah. It was a good meeting. It was about an hour long. Honestly, we primarily talked about Central Middle School. So I don't want to steal everybody's thunders by jumping into that right away, but that was the primary conversation. So I feel like probably we should let Dr. Jones and Ben give an update and then we can get into the conversation.
I will say, I think the document we sent today that capitalizes kind of on the questions that you asked yesterday is very helpful, but you would have to bring that up in your email because it is not in your packet because we just had from yesterday to today to get them done.
Mind questions for folks at home.
Yeah, but there's some good questions where you're looking at, like you asked things about how many tuition students are at each school. There's information about class size. What does our middle school look like in comparison to K-5? And what does that look like going into next year? And because we've had a lot of discussion about teaming. Ben, do you have that document sitting in front of you, the one we did today?
I do not.
Okay.
It's also posted to board docs.
Sorry, is that just Q&A 3, the one that was posted? Just so I have it in front of me.
Yes, and it says at the top from the budget committee meeting.
That's budget questions 3. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my computer's slow. Yeah, it didn't make it in there for some reason, probably because it was so late today. Or I don't have it. That's the sets. We have three because we had the first set and then we had a follow up. Is it up there? Oh, great. Thank you. Ben, I don't, if you can actually just kind of go through the questions. I can see from here, but not very well.
So we attempted, based on the very lively discussion we had at the budget committee, we just attempted to sort of put those questions in this format just so everyone can have a opportunity. I think, as Sophie's already mentioned, a lot of it is dealing with Central Middle School. For me, I'm a visual learner, so I always go to the graphs, and I think the graphs speak to a lot of the narrative. So if you look at this one right here, that speaks to the average class size as we sit today. So we just took the ones in blue are pre-K through grade 5. You can see it starts at pre-K of 15 going to 19 to grade 5. And then the multicolored ones are the 3 middle schools, both grade 6, 7, and 8. And we just attempted to keep each middle school the same color. I think the focus there is you see Central Middle School, grade 6 is the average class size is the 12. And you can see the balance where the rest of the middle schools are 17, 14, 15, and particularly Central Middle School is 15, 16 in the out years. I think one of the major decisions that we had is if this was just the one data point, you would say that's just an outlier. You wouldn't make adjustments. But if you go to the next chart, thanks, Mike. You see the incoming grade 5 to grade 6. You see that the 12 continues, and so that's when you start looking at the class size at Central is lower than pre-K at 15. And again, if it was just 1 year, you would say that'll make it up. And then we also attempted to, I think if you go just a little bit further down, we tried to do the math. So again, on that chart, we did not upgrade the blue charts. We didn't change those. I don't think it was really germane to the discussion point, but we tried to do the math. If you look at the average class size at Eastern and Western, it's 15 right now. In order for Central Middle School to reach that same average, the math suggests that you need to have 32 students in grade 6 and 32 additional students in grade 7. So you would need 64 students to come into Central Middle School in order to bring it up to the same average that the other 2 middle schools work. And all the other prior narratives, we talked about the catchment zone, the tuition payments, and all the other stuff that the budget committee brought up, I think just suggests that's the math you need to get to equal, if it's important to equal to that number. That's just the math. I'm just the math guy, so I'll stop there.
Go ahead and go to the next question, Mike. So on question 8, this is just talking about is cross-teaming new to middle schools. Again, just reiterating, because the first time that we had the discussion, it was so new for everybody. And I know you've been getting a lot of questions. So we do have cross-teaming at all 3 of our middle schools. And if you scroll all the way to the end of this document, or page 6 to 8, you actually can see the schedules there. And hand it to you. So so it's the back 3 pages where you can actually see the schedules. And these were put together by each principal. And it lets you know the amount of teaming that happens on 6, 7, and 8. So again, that's just informational, because at the budget meeting, as you ask those questions, it's hard when you don't have something in front of you to look at.
And just lastly, I'll point out my favorite question is number 9. Is the special education is a constant discussion point. So what we did here was we took the same districts that we've historically compared ourselves to. It's the same districts that were in the slide, the superintendent slide on the performance. We took those same districts. The state of Connecticut has a site called EdSite. You can pull up a lot of data. For fiscal year 23-24, so it's 1 year old data. But the important thing here is they have standardized all of this information. Every single Board of Education has to report out in a very rigid, structured way the reporting structure. Patrick and his team have the pleasure of making sure that our general ledger maps to how the state wants it mapped. So these numbers are really apples to apples from district. The key from the takeaway here is if you go to that very bottom, the state average. So they take all the numbers. Those are big numbers. Those are in the billions, but it shows you that of the state average, 11.9 versus the 3.6, it's 26% of the spend. So that's the state average that at boards of education across the state, the average is 26% of their budgets is allocated towards special education. So we do that. Then you just go a little granular to those districts. You can see the numbers ranging from, and we try to just do the color chart. The green is low and the red is high. And you can see that Greenwich is 27. So we're right in the middle. When you look at the rank, we're 4 out of 8. So we're dead smack in the middle from our districts, but also incredibly close to the state average. But just a data point when we take a look at, because special education has historically, it's been a lot of points the board raised in their Q&A, and it's a significant cost driver.
And I might just add, the districts that you're looking at are the same districts that we use when we benchmark for our student achievement. And the decision was made that these are the districts we compete with. And so instead of just randomly pulling, districts across the state, we're very consistent so that we're looking at like communities.
Rich?
Next question. 10 is just really talking about when do teachers have time to plan. And we talked about it yesterday, but it, again, just memorializes, puts it in writing. We have extended Wednesdays. They have team time on their schedule. All 3 middle schools will have a new schedule. They're working as a team of middle school principals right now to be more consistent across all 3 schools. They have non-instructional planning time. And now that we know how much teaming actually takes place, I think once the new schedule is in place, we can have a better discussion about how do we, for cross team, make sure that the teachers have time. Because I don't think, even for me, I didn't realize how much we had at Eastern, for instance, until I saw the schedule actually put together. So number 11, this was a big discussion. And
Push to talk, please.
Sorry, if you teach both grades 6th and 7th, how will you be able to go to those teaming meetings? Will you only be able to go to one and not the other? And how many, is it every Wednesday that you meet for teaming, or is it once a month?
So it's on their schedules, and right now the way it looks is different than it will look next year. So, and actually Veronica had asked for the schedules, but because next year all 3 are going to be similar, and teaming is actually on their schedule for a time. What we have been talking about for Central is probably the easier model, because the same teachers teach the 6th and the 7th grade group, where actually if you look at Western and Eastern, if you look at those schedules, it's very random. The area where they have the hardest time is obviously math, because we have so many different advanced levels. So they all cross team on math. The next one, 11, it's a big topic, and I think we talked about it quite a bit yesterday. Whether you call it redistricting, micro districting to balance schools, and is that possible? Certainly it's possible, but I think between now and September, I would not recommend that. It is a huge undertaking, and generally you spend at least a year. There's a lot of work that has to take place. You hire the demographers to come in and do that. And I just reference Fairfield Public Schools because they just went through this process about 2 years ago, or over the last 2 years, and their document alone is 186 pages. It has different options because they really have to drill down and look at, okay, what are all the addresses? Where are kids? Where would you draw the lines? And then I just gave you a couple of key questions. And this is just because I've been in growing districts where we had to do this. And things like, are fifth grade students going to be grandfathered? So they don't actually count when they go into middle school. Most districts, if they're going to redistrict, they think about things like that because the kids have been together for so long. It could be pretty traumatic for a student. If they have sibling at a middle school, are you grandfathering in that family for their other siblings? Because if you have a seventh grader and next year you're going to have a sixth grader, are you going to have them at two different middle schools? Probably not. And there are just a lot of key questions like that that you have to analyze as a board, decide what you would want to do. And again, you don't, and I think if you scroll down, Mike, it actually talks about you don't do it for cost savings. We would be looking at, because what we were talking about is how do you balance schools? It could cost more, and you have to go into that eyes wide open, because if you get a higher population, for instance, of high needs who ended up at Central, then we may need more EL teachers. We may need more special ed. You don't know how that's going to play out. If the districts that are looking to, say, close a school, certainly there's cost savings there, but that's not what we're talking about. And just as a reminder, we do have a capacity study that is taking place right now by the firm that does most of this type of work actually in our region and across the state. But we'll have that, I believe, in February. Ben, is that when we think? So go ahead and scroll down unless anyone has questions on that particular topic. So at the bottom of that one, it also, one of the questions that came up yesterday, you'll hear, sorry, go up slightly, Mike. Some of the people will say Eastern is so overcrowded. And I think it's just really looking at it from what the building is built for. So Central current building is built for 734, Eastern is 904, Western is 696. And these numbers come directly from the master plan when we did all of that work in 2018. Eastern was at 900 students at one time. So they were definitely full, I think probably back around 2019, 2020. But just like other areas of the district, enrollment has fallen. And the new Central Middle School is being built for 550, but can hold up to that 660. So it was built that way for flexibility, so not quite as big. Eastern does have a small cafeteria. So, and even on their brand new schedule, you'll see when they get ready to share that with us, that they'll have an extra lunch rotation. They have to, just because they can't get as many kids in the cafeteria. So that was just, again, answering a question yesterday about, are we overcrowded or not? 12, this has to do with magnet theme. Could we look at a magnet theme, and would that help? Again, this is something that takes time. To do that between now and September would not be recommended. You have to spend a lot of time on, what is your magnet theme? And then once you actually have a theme, and you have to train staff, you have to purchase resources, materials, depending on the theme. If it's something like International Baccalaureate, which has been brought up and was brought up in our meeting yesterday, you actually want to, first of all, get staff trained. They have to be starting at a level 1. And then you have to kick off the authorization process for middle years. So there's just a lot to do. It doesn't mean we can't do it. And would that entice people? It may. It's just between now and September. That would be a challenge. And since I've been here, at least over the last 7 years, there's been casual conversation about magnet at Central, but we've never had it on the board agenda or a serious conversation.
No, I just had a comment, which is I feel like this often happens that our budget conversations lead us to have policy discussions, which are really great, but actually don't save us any money. So, I think that, like, being mindful of that this is a conversation about budget. Like, I'm glad that we explored all of these ideas, but none of them seem to come up with a solution for how we don't increase the budget basically if we're going to add back any staff, we're increasing the budget. And there's no sort of rationale for moving staff over from other schools and things like that. But I hope that we can continue these other conversations, these policy questions, because I think they're really interesting ones of would we like to have a magnet middle school? Do we want to do IB? But they don't solve the budget issue. That's the problem.
So you recall, I mentioned these three buckets at the beginning here. So since we're talking about Central Middle School, most of the questions are about Central Middle School. It only makes sense thematically that we stay with the CMS bucket. So let's talk about any other questions or thoughts or comments people have, particularly towards the CMS aspect of the budget. Ms. Hurst's hand has been politely up over there for a while, and then we'll go to the other Karen.
Sorry, had a question. I was going back when we were talking about the average class size, this year and next year in comparison to, for Central comparison to Eastern and Western. As an aside, we did have a middle school with a magnet. Western had Avid as a magnet for many years now. Avid's been brought out to other schools, and then it also took in a significantly larger number of students with needs. And so that's what I was going to say. When we're looking at the class size numbers, is it still skewed that Western has more of a population with need than it would at Central? Because, obviously the number of we're obviously looking at the number of butts and seats, but that doesn't actually equate to really the needs of those students. So, 12 students could really be at one school, doesn't always equate to 12 at another. So that's sort of what I was just wanting to ask, if we know what the makeup of those classes might be.
Yeah, and that was a good question. And we did talk about that yesterday, and it really kind of relates to that question too on the same document. And that was really how many tuition students are at each school. And tuition, as a reminder, most of those tend to be teachers' children. Especially if they teach in that building, and that helps them be able to still participate in clubs and other things for us. Then we have out of the catchment areas, and you can see those. When you look at Western right now, they have 9 out of catchment, and it really, when we had our magnet actually operating, we did have more students going from Eastern to Western because they were known for their outstanding special education program. So it put a little bit of pressure on Western where they were getting full, as well as they had more needs, and they felt like they could not. And remember, this was coming out of COVID as well. And so they felt like we needed to pause the magnet. So we've paused it the last couple of years. However, if they have a sibling there, those students could still go, which was, we thought, the right thing to do. So, but it did make a very big difference at Western. And again, because of what it was known for. So a magnet theme could make a difference if it was something that was really attractive for people.
I mean, if you look at the numbers, if you're just talking about out of catchment, there's 21 students from Central that are attending Eastern and Western out of catchment. It's not my place to know why that may be, but it begs the question as to what the makeup of the students of those classes are, class sizes are. Because again, 12 students in one school doesn't always equate to 12 in the other one. So before we start looking to reduce numbers, I mean, I know we're not talking about any of the other schools at this point other than Central, based on what Chair Mercanti Anthony was saying. So, that was my biggest question, was just making sure that we're looking up the makeup of the 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade at each of the 3 schools to ensure that, there's enough coverage if there's, at those schools with those reductions.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, EL, special education, all that's calculated differently. That's not looked at just within that standard class, the core classes.
Right. That's why
there's a formula for those.
Right. That's what I was just trying to get at, is because obviously, some of those core classes are changed based on, which students are in them. That's all.
See what other questions, Ms. Kraus.
Thanks. As I've been looking into this, I think some of the challenge that we're facing with Central Middle School is due to the projected enrollment being below what would be an efficient scale, given the number of different levels of courses, the number of electives that are offered across our schools. A potentially budget neutral, because I do think it's really important we stay within BET guidelines, a potential budget neutral option that we discussed at the budget committee yesterday was if it is open enrollment, and we heard a lot of demand from the community at our last meeting, teachers move with students. As we've seen, the class sizes are quite small as they are. It wouldn't be fiscally responsible to put 2 full teams with such a small population. If enough students moved, I think right now, if I'm remembering this correctly, we've got 2 teams per grade at Western, a team and a half at Central is what we're talking about doing. And then I think there's more than 2 teams, maybe 2.5 over at Eastern. So if a sufficient number of students came over, that half team per grade could potentially move over as well. It would not impact the budget. And so I think it's something that, yeah, we talked to the superintendent. I know you don't feel it, you think it's unlikely to be sufficient to hit that number. And it very, very well may not, but at the same time, I think you've also said it's not that much effort, doesn't really cost anything. We're set up for magnet anyway. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of downside to give it a shot.
To what?
To see if, yeah, to put it out there along with our other magnet signups, who's not zoned for Central, who'd be interested in attending if we're able to, and let's see what the numbers look like, and then we can make a more informed decision. I think we're all sort of speculating, but we don't really have the facts.
And at the budget meeting, we talked yesterday about open enrollment. Just an open enrollment concept is very simple to do. It's just a matter of who wants to go. And then you always have to set it up as though it could be a lottery, because what if a lot of students wanted to go? You don't want to be oversubscribed. But because we do it for pre-K and we do it for our magnets already, we have a lot of experience. So, and just keep in mind, even on this, the document we were just looking at on that question 1, staffing changes every year. And that's why I gave you kind of what the projection is for elementary. And you can see, we have 10 sections that could be added. And you're only talking about a couple of students away, and they're going to be at the guidelines. There are 8 that look like they may go down. But if that doesn't happen, sometimes we're adding teachers in September. Middle school and high school are no different. I'm having discussions right now in a few key areas where we're really close, where we may have to add, say, a 0.2 somewhere, just based on more students qualifying in special ed, for instance, or students needing more of a certain type of class at high school, and they need to make schedule adjustments, and we don't have a class available because they're full.
So
I just was going to follow up on Karen's comments about the open enrollment. I mean, I like that idea. I do want to, for the members of the public who are listening, I think one of the things we also discussed is that we didn't feel like it would be financially prudent to offer busing with that. So I think, if we did offer open enrollment, unfortunately, the burden would be on the families who decide to do that they would need to find transportation for their child to get to school, which is something obviously everyone knows. Normally you're entitled to transportation to school depending on, the distance you live from school. But, as we alluded to earlier, transportation is an incredible cost for us. So we can't sort of entertain anything that might increase that cost further, or frankly, make the logistics more complicated, which is one of my other biggest concerns.
Paul?
I have 2 questions. Number 1, Ben, when you spoke earlier about 34 kids in the 6th grade and 34 kids in the 7th grade potentially going to Southern, was that us getting to an average across the schools, or was that the number of kids we needed to get to the second team? And I think you were talking about average, right?
Average.
Okay. And so I think the subject is more about what do we need for the second team? So right where you were. And do you know that answer, Karen?
I think, Dr. Jones, hadn't you said it was 170? Was that the threshold?
Well, we were calculating. Do you remember the exact number? It's right around 170. You'd like to be 180, 185, but 170 is reasonable, where you're large enough that you can feel okay about that.
And so how many more kids do we need in the 6th grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade to get to the best teaming model? 40 in each grade?
The current projections are 131, 132 kids for 6th and 7th next year. So you're probably about, at CMS, you're probably 40 short per grade.
Well, I think that's what Ben was saying, is that for Central, you would need 32 6th graders, 32 7th graders.
I want the most conservative.
Additional.
Yeah.
A second question I had, I didn't understand it, and I should have asked in our budget meeting. But when we spoke about open enrollment, I think Dr. Jones, you had mentioned that, maybe I got it wrong. So that if we did open enrollment, we have to do it for everyone. And I don't, could we just do open enrollment to Central from Eastern and not offer that to Western?
That would be a question really for the attorney. I think we would want to ask. The question I felt yesterday was more about what if you had too many EL students, for instance, and we don't have enough teachers there. We have to be able to service those students, regardless of what school they're in. And if we're having open enrollment, it is open to all. Whether or not you could just do one school, it is likely, but I would want an attorney opinion to make sure they're not looking at that like it's discrimination, and especially because Western is a Title I school. So I would want to be very thoughtful about that.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, just a little bit of a clarification for the public who wasn't in the meeting. Oh, the reason that we were talking about that in the committee was recognizing, that Western Middle School is also one of the priority schools. They're currently at about 170 per grade, and they have the 2 full teams. We don't want to solve the Central Middle School problem by exporting the problem to Western. That was the reason we were asking if you could move, if we could be more targeted in where we move students, because the ultimate goal was to get to an efficient scale at each of the 3 schools.
Wendy?
Right. So I like the idea of the open enrollment, and the lotteries. Just to your point, Sophie, I had my own children went to ISD, and when they went, you couldn't go to Eastern. You had to stay. I tried to have my kids go to Eastern. They said no. He was at the time, he was the only one from ISD going to Central. So that was tough. But it ended up being okay. He lived. I didn't even try with my second one. And we ended up loving Central. I mean, I'm so happy that they were there. And they were happy to go back to be with their friends from Cos Cob. I don't know why I just went into all of that, but and also lottery, the parents should know that if you're going to lottery into another school, you're responsible for driving your child there. Like we can't be responsible for the transportation, to your point. And that was always part of the deal. What else? And then the out of catchment areas. Maybe we just have to have people stay within their school district. Like you can't just go to another, I mean, it's to the same point that I had about the lottery. You just have to stay in your district unless there's some real, a bullying issue or something. One more thing, and then I'm going to stop. Parkway, giving them the option, those children, so that they're not split. I think giving them a priority would be really nice if we could offer them. If we did the open enrollment, offer it to them first.
Yeah, and I had brought this up at yesterday's meeting, but I just wanted to bring it to the entire board and to everyone watching. I know that the math makes sense to keep the 4 FTEs at Central Middle School. I'm sorry, to reduce the 4 FTEs at Central Middle School to make it equitable to class sizes at Eastern, et cetera. But there's other factors. I feel like with the new building construction, the new automation of schedules, scheduling of the half team between 6th and 7th grade, all these things have been discussed. It might be very chaotic beginning to the school year. So my thought is the current budget seems to come in at 3.13%. That kind of leaves about $230,000 of wiggle room to keep it still under 3.25. If the average teacher salary is around $108,000 to $130,000, I posit that perhaps we could put 2 FTEs in at Central Middle School and not take anything out of the budget. I know that's not what anybody wants to hear right now, but it's just a thought that we could, and those would, of course, it's not our purview to say where they would go, but I think math and language arts, but it's like they would be there for the faculty at Central Middle School to be able to plug in where they might need to do that. And that's just an idea that maybe we could discuss.
So I'll kind of give an answer similar to what I did yesterday. We can do whatever the board wants to do. I mean, we'll make it work. I think though, with something like adding back in, I do think we need to reduce somewhere else. And if you just, again, look at those elementary numbers, if we end up needing 4 teachers or 5 teachers, it's $500,000 like that. And I also, Patrick, I don't know if you could send that one slide to Mike and actually bring it up, because I think it's a lot of people in the community definitely don't understand that 2.5 million. So this budget, while we are just barely under guidelines, that is because right now, at least from what we're hearing, we have grace from those who've been elected that they support our budget. This budget, if we didn't have that 2.5 million, would be a 4.4%, 4.3 or 4.4.
4.3.
4.3. And we go sit through this, we walked GEA through it. So if you're adding back in, I feel like it's making it a little more challenging. We're really saying we're above 4.3. And again, there's been a lot of support for this budget. And if we need to reduce another 200 somewhere else, we'll figure it out.
So, Dr. Jones, you probably just want to clarify what you mean by the 2.5 million.
I don't know. Are you trying to get the slide to Mike? And then we're going to bring it up, and the finance team will walk us through it.
Yep, I just sent it to Mike, so probably in a few seconds.
While that's going up, just to further deflate expectations here, because I don't want to get anybody too excited. We haven't heard from any 5th grade families voicing an interest in switching middle schools, right?
Not at this time, but I don't know how many people in the entire community are dialed in and watching our meetings.
Paul,
Just while we wait for the slide, I'll give you some filler, but thank you, Dr. Jones. That was on my mind as well. We do have some people split with where is this number actually? And what we've done effectively is made everyone happy right where we're at. So thank you for recognizing that.
go ahead.
Okay. So this is a chart kind of like lay out the 3.13% that we are talking about for the budget year to years versus the other 4.4% that Tony just mentioned. So if you look at the top part of the chart, so when we compare the year to years, the starting point is where it is the starting point. The way that kind of like in the past when we look at our budget year to year is to kind of like the starting point is our current year original budget. The current year original budget is the 198 million at the top left corner of the chart. And then we all knew that there is a 2.5 million on lapsing account. That is the money that we reserved for the bus transportation use in the current school years. And therefore, this current school years, we are expecting we are going to spend the $200 million. The $200 million is the starting point that we use to calculate the 3.13% that is in front of us on the budget book on the superintendent budget presentations. So when you look at the 2.5 million, basically this is kind of like a gift from the BET recognizing that we are going to spend this on the bus this year. That's kind of like take it into consideration as our starting point. That kind of like we look at a 3.13% year-to-year growth. Otherwise, if we are looking at a traditional way of the budget year-to-year growth, it will be the 4.43% on the chart.
Just to make sure, let me reiterate that to make sure I understand it. So this time last year, we ended up approving a budget of 198 million and change. If you take that number and compare it to the proposed budget right now before us, that would be a 4.4% increase. What happened over the course of the year is because of increased transportation costs and the renegotiation of our transportation contract, we ended up spending an additional 2.5 million that we realized from savings. So the actual money spent last year is closer to 200. When you look at that percentage compared to the proposed budget, it's that 3.1.
Correct.
Okay, so I feel like we might be transitioning away from CMS, but go ahead, Bob. I hope.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I don't know. I just feel like if we feel like we need it, and as Dr. Jones said, if we feel like we need it for Central Middle School, or and we haven't gotten to the other schools or the other, this is the only bucket we're talking about. But if we feel like we need it, I feel like what we could do is ask for it, and that's why we have a BET as well. The BOE could ask for this. The BET could say that's ridiculous. We're not going to do it. And then we have to, that's then when we come back to it. And I also want to iterate, you guys have done an amazing job with the budget as well. And I feel like I'm pulling strings, and I apologize because you guys have done an amazing job trying to figure out all of this stuff and coming in with the numbers you did. I really appreciate that.
I saw Veronica first. No, I'm the chair. I say Veronica.
Thank you. This is a little bit, go with the gavel. This is a little bit long, and sometimes I've explained it a couple times, and I hope that it makes sense. My concern, and something that I feel like I still don't understand, is that as the 4 positions are eliminated at Central, how does it impact the actual scheduling? My fear is that if we look just at student numbers and faculty and sort of match those, it on such a small scale as Central is, that, for example, if there's not enough wiggle room in the schedule with the staff and then what the student needs are, for example, you could use English, that there's not going to be enough for the students, enough classes, enough staff for the students to teach the classes that are needed. I'm sorry, I told you guys this was going to be a little long-winded. And that's really my concern, that with such small numbers at Central, that eliminating more staff is going to make the schedule almost too tight. And maybe they'd be able to figure it out. But if one person, stepped out of line, and not that anyone would do anything wrong, but there's sick day, there's an assembly, which could throw the whole schedule off, or things like that there wouldn't even be coverage for other classes and things like that. It was a long question. Sorry.
No, I think what's different this year is I came right out of the gate and we're trying to be very clear about what the numbers are. This happens every single year across the entire school district. Some years we add an elementary, some years it's down. Middle school. Sometimes we cut FTE. A teacher leaves. We just don't replace the retirement if it's not needed. And it may be in June and it may be in July. I mean, we have those discussions ongoing right now. I have teachers retiring that we didn't know were going to retire in January and February. So Dr. Budd and I are already saying, do we put a permanent placement in there, especially if we're going to end up reducing positions depending on what's going on. But it's just, we're having the discussion, and what happens is if you get more students that all of a sudden show up in June, July, and people buy houses and move in, you add the staff. And since I've been here, the only time we have ever laid anybody off was last spring with like media assistants, when that was tough. But teaching positions, we're such a large district that we have enough to be able to shift. And again, we already know people across the district that are retiring. We have people that, will have a baby and they decide not to come back. So I don't see that as an issue. When class sizes are so small, when they're sitting at 12, if we were sitting at, 14 and 15, and we were talking about this, trying to get to say 21, then yeah, that would make it tighter. But 12 is a really low number. And I still say, and I think Ben said it tonight, when we think we have little, 3 and 4-year-olds in pre-K and our number is 15, and they will hit 16 or 17 by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. On CMS.
This is maybe not on CMS, it's across the board, but you mentioned that, throughout the year something happened, or no, the families move in, people buy houses, things go up. We're setting this budget now, and the reality is going to hit, full year from now. There's always moving things around, but there's always a supplemental. Do you ever use that lever, the supplemental interim, if interim appropriation? Thank you. If more kids moved in and things like that, where does that come in?
We did have a question in one of these packets that has the interims, I think. And it actually lists the interims over the last couple of years that the finance team put together. It usually has to do with things like more students qualifying special education. It could be transportation. And Ben, do you have the list there? You might just share what some of those are.
So question 30, page 20, round 1. So we showed the interims, and you can see it's probably, just quickly, it's like a 50-50 between capital and operating, but the question I think is really on operating. So you can see in 2024 was based on the past 2 years was the question. 2024 is when we had special education as an operating interim because of the pressures of special education. Just how the interim would work is generally you have to wait until well past the midpoint, just so when you start running the forecast and you start looking at your numbers going, because the BET is going to say, well, you're going to have surpluses elsewhere. We have to do budget transfers versus adding to your budget. But you certainly can do that once you recognize that you do not have the money by June 30th to pay for the decision.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back and address Bob's comment about going back to the BET and asking for more. Just speaking for myself, I'm not comfortable doing that. I think the BET's frankly been generous, including the $2.5 million that I don't think they had to do. And I think, especially in a year with slightly declining enrollment, I think we knew, given the well above average, above inflation rate increase in the GEA contract, the increase in the transportation, and the increase in special ed, this was going to be a bit challenging. But I just have trouble when we do the math and say one team covers 120 students and we're basically predicting to have about 10 more than that. And if you do the math, it kind of works out to 1.1 teams. I have trouble putting 2 full teams against something that math would imply 1.1. I think I understand the logistics get harder and we have to make sure the scheduling's right. But given other places that need money and other class sizes in other areas, as the superintendent mentioned, I can't go back and ask for more money for that.
So let's move on off of the CMS topic to other aspects of the budget. The one other that we haven't had a lot of questions about, and I think it's important we talk about it publicly, is the whole idea of start time and the changes we use, the changes that we implemented last spring. That right now all those changes are maintained in the current operating budget, right?
Yes, where we are as of today.
Okay. So any questions or thoughts or comments on that? Go ahead, Sophie.
Yeah. I think the high school start time seems to be going pretty well. I think the feedback that we've been getting on that is overall pretty good. I'm really interested to look, and I hope that we can sort of look at the data that we get at the end of the year and sort of see if there was any impact, sort of educational attainment. We could look at whatever AP scores or whatever kind of data we can pull. I remember we talked about that, and I think we should follow up on that. But most of the impact seems to have been positive. I wish that we could do something about the elementary school times, and I did raise it with Dr. Jones in terms of I think it is hard having some of our elementary schools start so late, but it really would be very expensive to make that change. So I feel like we probably should ride it out for another year and really focus on a bunch of things to do with transportation, like securing a permanent place to park our buses. That would give us more flexibility in negotiating our bus contracts, hopefully, And I'm really thinking now in like 5-10 year kind of plan for transportation at this point. So it has nothing to do with this year's operating budget, but I think it's important to flag it of like, it's such a driver of our budget right now. And it's not one that I feel good about. So, I would love to solve for that, but I don't feel like we have any flexibility in the budget to start changing the start times. And I also feel, frankly, like that I don't know that that would be a favor to families because it's always so challenging. And just speaking for myself, like, you go through these adjustments and it takes half the school year to figure out how you're going to do it. And then if people turn around next year and we're like, and guess what? And now we're going back, be like, well, I just figured out my transportation and my childcare and my work schedule, and now you're going to change it. So, my feeling is we leave it the way that it is because we don't have money to change it. And any change that we make, I think, would make it more expensive. That seems to be Dr. Jones and Ben's consensus on that question because I did raise it with them. And I also don't know that it would benefit our families at this point. But I certainly think we should think about it. And for the new board members who weren't here and maybe didn't tune into every single board meeting before you got on, Michael, Joseph, and I were very opposed to changing the high school start time. But, I'm happy that even though we really were forced to do it to meet the budget requirements, I think it's been okay for the high school.
Paul?
I agree with you. I mean, we don't have the money to do it, right? But what I don't want to lose track of, and I hope we keep it in mind, is that there was a lot of people that took a lot of time and a lot of science and energy and debate and public input, and for many years that pioneered this. And Greenwich was leading in the science of this. I know a lot of people say that, well, maybe 8 o'clock is the perfect time, but when I look at read the material on this, 8:30 was it. I just don't. I recognize we don't have the money to do it, and so that's a hard stop. But as we move forward, I still want to be thoughtful of those people who, because quite frankly, I wasn't on board with that 10 years ago when they did it, but I got talked into it with the science and with the community support and all of the due diligence that went into it. It's a shame that we had to change it without the public input and the debating, but such are the nature of finance.
Karen, go ahead. I see your hand.
I was going to say, I know we were our hand was generally forced last year. It was the only actual efficiency we could find was revising the bus schedules and going back. We didn't. It's fascinating having sat in with all of the students and their and having that discussion. They actually like the change at the high school. So and we certainly haven't been getting any complaints other than the complaint just the busing issues that we had at the start of the year. So I think remains to be seen. We should probably not consider changing that and focus on what's actually happening in the schools at this point. Much like Sophie, I mean, I certainly would prefer the elementaries not be starting so late. But I know we have a lot of different issues ahead of us for this year in discussions budget wise. But yeah, I mean, nobody wanted to change it back, and unfortunately, when we made that initial change to change our school start times initially a couple years ago, there was a promise from other districts that they would be following us, and none have. There was one or two that followed and made later school start times for the high school and the other, and ended up again having to revert back because they couldn't afford the busing. I think I mentioned this last year. The state was looking to make a requirement for it for later, and districts all around Connecticut begged them not to do it because they couldn't afford it with the busing. So this more puts us, unfortunately, back in line for other school, the other school districts for after school competitions and after school, sports and whatnot. So
I will say that I mean, we've gotten a number of we've gotten less in the last month or so, but we certainly have gotten a fair amount of email traffic and other comments about everything from near empty buses to complaints about buses getting there to the high school very early and whatnot. So I wonder how much of current lack of email traffic might be due to people, families finding other plans and other means, or resignation to this is what it is at the moment. But my question, all that said, without, I don't know if you can even ballpark it. Do you have any sense, Ben, like if we were to go back to last year's salary, it would be more than the 2.5 million we saved last year. You have any sense, like, or in the ballpark, what kind of money we're talking about, budget impact?
2.9.
Go ahead.
I just want to reiterate, right? We can't afford it, and I get that. But when we're talking about it, I think we need to put more focus and attention on the community input. The board at that time, I did ask you for if I could be GHS government. I didn't get that post, so I'm more comfortable saying this now. But I don't think polling the kids is the should be the lead key point. And look, I appreciate the athletics as well, but as Karen said, our main focus is education. It's a moot point right now, but I did want to make it.
Saying about the positives of it.
Go ahead.
I think just as a reminder, because you've seen some of the data, but when we were talking about this last spring, and Ralph and I really felt like we were going to have more kids that were going to be able to eat breakfast. And you can weigh children eating in the morning and being ready to learn and going to sleep. What has happened with food service in the morning is unbelievable. And these aren't the exact numbers, but you're talking $3,000 versus $23,000 in the first month of school because kids are eating breakfast. They're getting there in time to sit with their friends. This is coming from the kids. They're able to go see a teacher. The teachers are in the classroom, 7:30. They're available for instruction. But a student who just wants to see their friends, they're saying they didn't have time to do that before because the buses would arrive. Some of them arrived at 8:20 and 8:25, and such a huge high school, they're running in the building just trying to get to class. So there are some real positives. At the end of the day, at student government, and I know Karen was there as well when they were talking about just getting out earlier. At the end of the day, they feel like it's released so much pressure and they actually can get their homework done and they are going to bed. And now again, student government are, there's some amazing students, but they're also very thoughtful about the entire student body. So there are some positives, and I think it's looking at everything. And I don't think there is any right or wrong answer. We ended up here, but it hasn't been disastrous where our kids are falling apart. There's still a lot of good stuff coming out of it.
So in a $207 million budget, I wanted to make sure we reserve some time to talk about other aspects or the concerns about the budget, other questions or thoughts or people had either from the meeting yesterday or other concerns. Anything else before we come back next week? People want to go. Ms. Hirsch, go ahead.
The one other thing I did want to talk, since we were talking, obviously our largest budget line item is staff, and we value each and every member of our staff. And I know it's an unfortunate aspect when we have to start talking about reductions and moving people around. But one of the places that we've reduced has been at the high school. And I see that there were still some discussions about further reductions there. And it concerns me, quite honestly, because we keep taking from the high school. And those children, those students there are having less opportunities, and we'll slowly have less opportunities if we keep pulling and reducing the staff numbers there. So, I really, to me, that is an exceptionally big concern. I'm trying to figure out in what way we think that we can reduce the numbers there. Is it just because you think that, enrollment's going down? I just don't want to reduce our offerings to the students who are counting on some of these things.
Yeah, I think at the high school, it's a very similar discussion to what we've been having tonight. Again, if you go back and you look in the budget book and you look at all the positions over the last 5 or 6 years that have been reduced, it's all over the place because we watch our numbers so carefully. We're not just going to go have this amazing elective and cancel it because we wanted to cut a staff member. And again, when we get to September, and our high school actually enrolls really early, so we kind of know more information there, which helps. But if we can't cut the 6.5, I think is the number, then we won't, and we have to figure it out. We used to actually have a small contingency in the budget when I first started, where it was for additional staff, and then that got cut. So if we have to add staff because something changes, then we just have to go in and figure it out. And that's part of what we do to manage the budget every year. But when you've got a staff that large, again, it's not a whole lot of positions. And it's based on, I personally go through every single master schedule every year. And I did it again this year, middle school and high school, literally every teacher schedule. Because what I'm looking for are things like, do we have classes that are sitting at 10 at the high school? Is it a scheduling issue because just nothing else worked on that block? Or is it just because we have additional staff in some core areas or elective areas? You know, do we have electives that we really need to go in and re-examine because they've been with us, you know, for 30 years, and now students aren't choosing that elective anymore. So that's just being, I think, doing our due diligence on staffing. But again, it happens every year. It's just this year, I came right out of the gate and we talked about it because I felt like it was important. And usually it tends to happen later in the spring once we know enrollment, but it's just studying the schedules.
Well, and you found some small classes.
Yes. Yes, and I've actually been on site at the high school. I spent 3 full days there. And one of the reasons I did that was there were certain things the board, before our new members were on here, you know, we talked about big things last year, throwing out the schedule and bringing in a new one. You know, we talked about getting rid of the house structure. This board talked to, again, pre some of you, talked about getting rid of sim skills. You know, we've had big conversations. And so that's why for me, if I see a class of 10, I want to go pop in and see. Maybe there's a reason for it, and I'm just looking at a piece of paper that shows 10. Maybe that was intentional because those students have high needs. But if I go in and it's just a really small class and I see that multiple times, then I try to figure out, why is that happening? Is it because we have too many staff in that core area due to the enrollment reductions?
Just also something that happened just before the new board came on, we did make a change to freshman English, and I think that was an opportunity to make schedules more efficient without reducing offerings to the students, which is, I don't know if everyone is familiar with that, but instead of having 3 levels of freshman English, we're going to have 2. Because one of the levels was only enrolling 80 kids. But then once you have 80 kids doing something, it pushes all of the other scheduling for those students and makes lots of other sections and ends up with like a lot of inefficiency. So I think that Dr. Jones has really done an excellent job of looking at scheduling things like that, which isn't changing the educational offerings for our students, but just being like, well, why are we having so many sections? You know, could you make this little tweak in the schedule and then suddenly you have like a more normal size schedule and you don't need to have so many sections. So I hope that's part of it, you know, as well. Certainly, I think it will be with English.
And just to clarify that change was made for curriculum and other purposes. We didn't make that. Wasn't a budget decision. It just happened to have budget efficiencies tied to it. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Just on the same page, just with the FTEs, I know the budget's been tight. I don't think anybody on this board has to be told that, but I assume there have to be upswings as well with students needing certain things at the high school. And I feel like with the FTE reductions year over year, it makes me wonder, will there come a time, or is there a time now where perhaps we need to look at adding FTEs as opposed to taking away FTEs year over year?
Well, I think that's actually been a criticism we've had over the last couple of years because from elected officials, because what's been happening is we've been adding staff all across the district. What's been happening, it's been the core classes where enrollment is down. That FTE has shifted to areas like special education, where we have grown by several percentage points. So we have been adding staff, but it's been in different areas. And that's why even with the high school FTE, it doesn't say exactly where those are coming from yet, because until kids enroll, till we look at where do we have retirements, where do we have somebody that's not returning, and you have to analyze the entire picture.
You answered my next question. Thank you.
Just to translate for folks watching, FTE's full-time equivalent. Usually we're talking about a teaching role in that, as opposed to full head count of all staff who are employed in the district.
Yeah.
So full head count has not been reduced to the same rate as FTEs has. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, sorry, just one clarification, because when we were talking about the 6.5 teachers, just to make sure I'm comparing it to the right benchmark, if I look at the follow-up questions and the GEA staffing by school, there are 235.7 teachers at, they're not numbered. It's the 4 out of 4 one. So I guess 235.7 teachers is the amount in the budget. Just order of magnitude in terms to compare what the reduction is versus the total.
Which question? Sorry, I'm trying to.
Sorry, I'm just trying to put into perspective. I think for folks out there, when we talk about 6.5 FTEs, just as a gut check, when I look at numbers like that, I want to know, hey, is that a big percentage of the current? Is it a small percentage? Is it somewhere in between? And my math was that it was sub 3%, right? There are over 230 teachers currently.
I caught up.
HHS?
The 865.3 is a full-time equivalent district-wide of teachers. You were referring to the high school number. Yeah, that's
Right.
right. Where's that number coming from?
Oh, sorry. Yes,
High
because we were
school.
talking specifically, Karen Hirsch had mentioned specifically
Great.
oh, there we go. Had specifically talked about the potential adjustments to the high school.
Yes,
And so I was just trying to put that in perspective.
absolutely. You're correct.
And just one more piece to that. Sometimes, as Dr. Bud and I are working on this, even though it's FTE 1.0, that doesn't mean it's even a full-time teacher. Sometimes we have teachers that are quite happy to work 0.8 and they really want to be part-time, and we've had to say no. But then now we're at a year where, okay, that may be beneficial. So sometimes it's pieces across the whole building.
Actually, as a response to Bob, when you were saying, at some point, maybe we have to add people. And I think we always are looking in that enrollment data, right? And it's like, is there going to be some, after COVID, it was like, are we going to get this huge baby boom or we don't know? And like what's happening with the Greenwich market. And I feel like part of my inclination to really adhere to these reductions when it's demanded by the enrollment numbers is because I anticipate someday we could actually have a big jump in enrollment numbers. And then we would be saying, listen, we need a bunch of extra teachers because suddenly we have twice as many kindergartners, right? And then those kids work all the way through the whole system. And then we have to accommodate them all the way, and maybe it's, if you look and now I'm getting like into historical data, but it's kind of amazing. And I didn't actually grow up in town. So people who did would know even better that, the enrollment in Greenwich Public Schools has gone, has had significant swings over time. So I can imagine certainly there could be a time, and I hope I hope that the trend line will be up for Greenwich Public Schools. And then I think obviously at that point we would have to add, but it's like when we see that it's slightly trending down in these years, like it feels like the responsible thing, to match the enrollment, and then we'll match the enrollment if it goes up too.
So I think that concludes our budget conversation for tonight.
Hey, Mike.
Yep, go.
I do not want to be the one extending
Look
this
at
meeting.
that.
I know.
Look at that.
I realize that.
Look at that. Public enemy number one.
You have 2 votes next week if you're going to take.
Thank you, sir. Please clarify. I was going to go, but go ahead.
You have the operating budget. You have food service. Food service usually we don't get a lot of questions on food service, and I recognize why Central Middle School took up a lot of the airtime on that. But if you have any questions on food service, let us know. But it's in the
It is in the back of the budget book.
It's in the back of the budget book. Yeah, it's a separate vote. Yeah, and we are holding the fees the same, so there's no increase in the meal charges. It's just the budget is a separate vote. I apologize.
Thank you for clarifying.
We may. Okay, so that concludes. That is our last order of business. Just before we go, I wanted to point out to everybody while I have you, on the old Greenwich Building Committee, the bids came in, and they were rapidly developing a price for that, but it does mean that we're going to need a special meeting. We're targeting the Monday, January 5th, because of construction timelines and everything else we need to, and we have to go before the BET and the RTM, and there's a lot of things. So we're looking at Monday, January 5th for a special meeting that would only have that agenda item. Likely on Zoom. This would likely be a Zoom only meeting, unless there are any objections to that. I didn't think so. Okay. That said, are there any motions that anyone would like to? I'm happy to entertain. Anyone would like to make?
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Walsh.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion to adjourn by Ms. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Cheney. All in favor? Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.